I have a 100 amp fuse panel. It has two pull-out fuse blocks. Behind each there are two cartridge fuses. One of these pull-outs is for the oven. Below these are 4-screw type fuses, and below these is a separate set of 4-screw in fuses, and next to this are two sets of 2-screw in fuses. These are for the AC and the dryer. At some time in the past they added a 100 amp breaker sub-panel below this main panel. The sub-panel is 100 amps and the power for this sub-panel comes directly from the main terminals that feed the main panel, bypassing the fuse panel directly to the sub-panel. They also tied an insulated conductor from the neutral/bare copper feeding the main panel and leading that to the sub-panel. From this sub-panel and leading out to the garage, about 40 to 50 feet away and underground, there are two insulated wires and a bare aluminum stranded wire. There is a breaker panel in the garage. I am feeling that I should be able to add a breaker panel for my house after the 100 amp sub-panel mentioned above. I don't have the funds to hire an electrician to change out the old panel, but it seems like I can bypass the old panel for now until I can come up with the funds to have it replaced. Actually, I could probably change out the old panel if I knew how to shut the power off at the meter. If I start at the 100 amp sub-panel mentioned above, it seems to me that I would attach the two feeders to the new panel and the neutral to the neutral lug on the new panel. And that I would use the bonding screw on the new panel. Also, I presume that I would connect the feeders to the garage to a 100 amp breaker in the new panel. Do I attach the bare neutral that leads to the garage to the neutral bar with a neutral add-on lug in the new main breaker panel, or is that not correct? IT seems correct, but I am compelled to ask because the neutral lug as compared to the grounding bar and the bonding screws for the panel are just a tad less clear to me. Please let me know if the above is correct, or what is the correct way regarding the above, and help clarify for me the neutral going to the garage and where it gets attached and the use of bonding screws in the new main panel. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Just Answer. My name is and I will be happy to assist you with your electrical question. 1. Sub-panel feeder circuits are always fed from a main panel. Sub-panels are downstream from a main panel. Sub-panel feeder circuits are required to be protected by a double-pole feeder breaker installed in the main panel. 2. New sub-panel feeder circuits are required to be a 4-wire circuit comprised of 2 hots, 1 neutral and 1 equipment grounding conductor. 3. A detached garage where a sub-panel is installed requires 2 8-foot ground rods spaced a minimum of 6 feet apart. 4. The neutral is always isolated in a sub-panel by not installing the main bonding screw or a main bonding jumper strap. At a sub-panel, only white neutral wires will land on its neutral bus bar, never any bare copper or green insulated equipment grounding conductors. A sub-panel requires a separately installed equipment ground bar which will only land the equipment grounding conductors. 5. Double tapping of the panel main lugs is a code violation. Only 1 conductor is allowed per lug. 1. Neutral lugs that attach to a neutral bus bar are sold at any local electrical supply store or any Home Depot or Lowe's. The neutral lugs are used to accommodate larger neutral feeder conductors. 2. See link shown below for a 100 amp rated neutral lug kit. http://www.homedepot.com/p/d homeline 100 amp load center auxiliary neutral lug hom 100 ncp/100154050. If you have any additional questions, just let me know and I'll be glad to answer them for you. Otherwise, don't forget to rate me before you log off. Thanks. Kevin.
Hi Kevin. Thank you for the response, it is helpful. Here is a description of the wires in the main panel, referring to the attached images. Number 1 and number 2 are the hot leads from the meter, and number 3 is the neutral lead from the meter. Number 4 and number 5 go to the hot side of the 100 amp breaker in the sub-panel, and number 6 goes to the neutral lug in the sub-panel. The sub-panel is just a few inches below the main panel. I am fairly certain this sub-panel is not bonded. In the second image, #S7 and 8 and 9 go to the garage via an underground feed. There is a breaker panel in the garage, which I already suspected was less than ideally grounded. I think the garage was built in about 1970. I have lived here for 12 years now. It seems to me that I can do the following in the new breaker panel: attach number 7 and number 8 to a 100 amp breaker and the bare aluminum number 9 neutral to an add-on lug, which would be attached to the neutral bar in the new panel. Run THHN from the neutral lug in the sub-panel to the main neutral lug in the new panel, and run 2 hot THHNs from the cold side, hot when the breaker is on, of the breaker in the sub-panel to the 2 hot lugs in the new panel. And use the bonding screw in the new panel. And better ground the garage with 2 8-long grounding rods at least 6 feet apart. Do I use one ground wire running from one rod to the next, then to the panel, or 2 separate ground wires to the panel, in the garage? And how much of the 8-foot rods can be exposed, and does the ground wire itself have to meet the actual ground? And, should the garage breaker panel be bonded? Thank you for all your help. I have always liked doing electrical wiring.
Thanks for the replies. 1. I am trying to understand your layout. Is the Wadsworth fuse box the main service panel for the home? 2. Is the range fuse cartridge at the main fuse box panel still being used, or will you be installing the old Wadsworth fuse box and replacing it with a breaker panel? 3. How is the detached garage wired to the home? Via direct burial cable or metal conduit?
Hi Kevin! 1. Yes, the Wadsworth panel is the main panel. 2. Since I don't know for sure how to shut off the electrical at the meter, I plan to put my new square DQO panel next to the Wadsworth and run the THHN as noted in my previous message. The plan is that the only thing left in the Wadsworth will be the main feeds coming in and the feeds going to the sub-panel, which is right below the main Wadsworth panel. Everything else will be wired to the new QO panel. This includes moving the oven wiring to the new panel. When I have the funds to do it, then I can hire an electrician to get rid of the Wadsworth panel. 3. I actually do not know if there is conduit running all the way underground to the garage or just down the house wall and up the garage wall. The garage was built in about 1970. I don't know if liquid tight/underground conduit existed then. The attached image shows how the wire enters the garage. I know this is not very telling, but I just don't know if there is underground conduit or if the 3 wires were just buried. Thanks, Kevin. I am aware that in older home wiring, when conduit was used, the conduit itself was the ground if the conduit went all the way to the panel, but I also know that is no longer acceptable.
Thanks for the replies and pick. 1. You can use a continuity tester to determine if the underground was installed in metal conduit all the way from the house to the garage. If it is metal conduit all the way, then the 4th equipment grounding wire is not required, since the metal conduit would also act as an equipment ground. 2. You currently have a code violation since the existing sub-panel feeder circuit originates at the main lugs but is not protected by a fuse at the Wadsworth panel. Since the range is still in place, the Wadsworth panel does not contain any additional 240 volts fuse spaces. Therefore, you need to either deinstall the Wadsworth and install a new main breaker panel in its place. Then a double pole breaker will be installed in the new Q&A panel that will provide the feeder circuit to the subpanel. The other option is to install the subpanel next to the Wadsworth and swing over all of the circuits. If the existing range fuse holder is rated for 100 amps, then you can install two 100 amp cartridge fuses and use that position as the 100 amp subpanel feeder over current protection device. A subpanel feeder circuit needs to be protected by either a fuse or a breaker at the originating panel board. Unfortunately, whoever installed the existing subpanel did not do that, and now you have a code violation. 3. If the underground is not metal conduit and you only have 2 hots and 1 neutral, then by code exception you will need to install the main bonding screw at the garage subpanel. This will tie the neutral feeder directly to the subpanel metal cabinet enclosure. Thus, the equipment grounds at the garage subpanel will be grounded through the neutral feeder. 4. Even if the underground is liquid tight, it can't be used as an equipment ground. 5. Most electrical utilities won't allow a homeowner to pull the meter as they may consider this as tampering and may result in a fine. Exterior meters are typically only allowed to be removed either by the electrical utility or by a licensed electrician. The left cartridge fuse block is the main disconnect in the Wadsworth. 6. Metal conduit from panel to panel or from a panel to device and or lighting boxes is still code compliant and still allowed to be used as the equipment grounding conductor. It is done all of the time. 7. THHN insulated wire is acceptable for indoor use. If exterior and or wet conditions, then type THWN wire is required.
Lots of learning. This is cool. Well, the learning is cool. The results, not so cool. Attached is the picture of the back of the Wadsworth panel cover. It makes me wonder if I only really have 60 amps. In this picture, note that I do not have screw and fuse numbers 9 through 12. I have all the rest though. I like the idea of running the new breaker panel from the range fuse block of the Wadsworth. However, I suspect that maybe it is not rated for 100 amps. And I presume this means that each cartridge fuse would be 50 amps, or in other words, I am guessing that the total of the cartridge fuses needs to be no more than the total rating. I am not surprised to learn that running the subpanel from the main lugs like they did is a violation. As I look at this diagram, there are things that are not wired like the picture. I.e., my AC and my dryer are run from the 2 lugs underneath the 2 cartridge fuse blocks, not from above them. And what you said about pulling the meter kind of sounds familiar. A friend and I flipped a house once, and I was watching the electricians pull the meter and change out the main panel of that house. I know we could have chatted on the phone about this stuff, but having it in writing gives me the chance to review it, and I learn and remember more this way. Thanks for your patience, Kevin.
You will like this line of mine then. I went to night school in the mid-80s and graduated college 3 times over an 8-year time period, all while working full-time. I would use the line from the movie Animal House. Wow, 8 years of college down the drain. Lol, I am also a former college electrical instructor and I still learn new things every day. Learning is always good. 1. The size of the service entrance conductors determine the amperage. If the service wires are 4 AWG copper or 2 AWG aluminum, then the service from the meter is 100 amps. If the service wires are either 6 AWG copper or 3 AWG aluminum, then the service is 60 amps. Based on the main fuse, looks like a 100 amp service that feeds the panel. 2. This panel was a common install type prior to the mid-1960s. All 120 and 240 volt circuits require an overcurrent protection device. Either fuses or breakers. 3. Electric ranges are commonly wired using either 40 or 50 amp fuses. I doubt the fuse cartridge is rated greater than 50 amps. If a 50 amp range circuit, then each fuse will be 50 amps in size. Correct, the maximum fuse size is dependent upon the maximum amp rating of the pull-out cartridge. No problem, glad to have assisted on your question. If you have any additional questions, just let me know and I'll be glad to answer them for you. Otherwise, don't forget to rate me before you log off. Thanks. Kevin. Thank you for the positive service rating as well as the generous bonus. Both are very much appreciated. If you have any other questions, just let me know. Take care and have a great weekend. Thanks again. Kevin.
If you have a home improvement or appliance question and want to chat with an expert now, visit justanswer.com/YTHI.